Okay.
Is that fine?
That's fine.
Since Maghrib is at 7,
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Not a problem. Okay. Just give me one second.
What we can do is, how do you want us to prompt you for Maghrib, when we break for Maghrib?
You could just indicate to me any type of way.
Okay, I'll be sitting around there, so I'll just let you know, right?
Okay. All right, I'm ready.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So first and foremost, I would like to thank everybody here for coming out and making it out to this event. So barakallahu feekum. Since we're starting a bit late, I'll go over it. I'll be moving along very quickly. So before I along to Imam Shadeed Muhammad, I'll give a brief overview of this event. Then we'll start, inshallah, with Quran recitation and then with announcements. So Bismillah. Racism is a loaded topic. Everyone is guilty of a moment where our speech portrays rather ignorance or racism. But we and the ones around us don't realize it because we're used to being subtly discriminatory. Comments such as Muslims can be racist, racism doesn't exist in Islam are misleading and wildly inaccurate. Oftentimes we quote the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his final sermon, where he says, there is no superiority for an Arab over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab over an Arab. Neither is the white superior over the black, nor the black superior over the white, except in piety. There is no doubt that there is ultimate truth in these statements, and the Islamic teachings view racism of all types, subtle and overt, as injustices. There is no place for racism in our community, in any community that is upholding guiding principles as prescribed by the Prophet ﷺ. However, we need to stop pretending that racism doesn't exist because we are Muslims. Just because we are Muslims, that doesn't mean that racism doesn't exist among us in the community. We tend to sweep important matters like this under the rug and neglect major social issues and ills that affect communities worldwide. The news flash is trying to pretend that racism does not exist, does not change the blatant discrimination that those who have a darker skin complexion or come from a different ethnic group, those ethnic backgrounds face. So Bismillah, we'll start with Quran. We'll move forward to with Quran recitation with Brother representing.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان يرتابوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله أولئك هم الصادقون قل أتعلمون الله بدينكم والله يعلم ما في السماوات وما في الأرض والله بكل شيء عليم يمنون عليك أن أسلموا قل لا تمنوا علي إسلامكم بل الله يمن عليكم أن هداكم للإيمان إن كنتم صادقين إن الله يعلم غيب السماوات والأرض والله بصير بما تعملون صدق الله العظيم
Takbir. Barakallahu feek for that beautiful recitation. So before, so next up would be our announcements with Brother Sang.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So just a couple quick announcements. I'll keep this brief so we can have as much time for Imam Shadeed to talk as much. Inshallah. So the first announcement is we're partnering with Fresh Prints that are selling, and they're selling basically sorry guys. Okay, so we're basically selling shirts for the New Zealand attack, and proceeds will be going towards the New Zealand, the families affected with the New Zealand attack. I'm sure you guys have seen in recent news. So these are what the shirts look like. The shirts vary from 20 and 25. So if you guys are interested, please check out the link. We will be sending out an email and announcements if you guys are following our social media. Please do try to buy those and spread the awareness for this, inshallah. Next Friday, inshallah, March 29th, we'll be holding our third session with Brother Nuruddin on our Halakha series on Barzakh, World Between Two Lives. The third session will be on punishments and pleasures in the grave. So inshallah, please try to come along. We do live stream our events. So if you're new to our series, we have live streamed our past two halakas. Please try to check those out on our Facebook, Hunter MSA. Our brothers and sisters at City College will be holding a janazah workshop with also Brother Nuruddin on March 28th from 6:30 to 8:30. We recommend you guys stop by if you guys are free, inshallah. Last but not least, Lehman College is holding an event called Parting the Seas of Dunya on also March 28th, 5 to 7 with Ustad Abdul Rashid. If you guys are interested in the story of Musa alayhi salam, please check it out, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, and
One quick thing to announce. During the lecture, if you have any questions that you would like to ask the speaker, feel free to text questions to 347-292-1672. So before I pass the mic along to the speaker, just a brief overview so you get to know the speaker a bit more. Imam Shadeed Muhammad is a graduate from the prestigious Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia. He graduated in 2007 with a bachelor's degree from the College of Hadith with a concentration in the sciences of Hadith, prophetic traditions. He also holds a degree in Arabic language from the same university. Since graduating, Imam Shadeed Muhammad has been involved in Islamic education on multiple levels. He has lectured at many Islamic centers, colleges, and universities throughout America and abroad using classical Islamic teachings infused with a cultural context that applies to Muslim youth. Currently, Imam Shadeed is an Islamic studies teacher and finishing his master's degree in community counseling at Wellington University. He also conducts a series of private courses that mix Islamic teachings with social psychology. Imam Shadeed's lectures can be found on his YouTube channel as well as his daily Islamic posts and reminders, which can be found on his Facebook page at Shadeed Muhammad. And without further ado, Imam Shadeed Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Thank you for that warm welcome and for the invite. I was very excited when I saw the topic. I love topics that are challenging, that literally force me to go back and do some research on my own. I know that you guys as Muslim youth are tired of the mundane khutbahs and lectures that you hear coming out of the Islamic institutions, many of the Islamic institutions across America. They don't address our social issues. They are in many regards irrelevant to where we are currently in our social climate here in America. And I personally applaud you guys for even coming up with the topic. Even having the guts to even, have or host myself to even talk about this topic. So with that, let me just say as a disclaimer from the very beginning that this talk is in no way, shape, form, or fashion designed to make anyone feel like a racist. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to point the finger at anybody. I don't want anybody to leave here in shame, holding your head in shame, because you think that some of what I'm going to talk about tonight applies to you. If you see what is going on, the whole purpose, if you guys are college students, if you guys are lifelong learners of the religion or in your secular pursuits of knowledge, it becomes a duty and a responsibility on you to change the social fabric that has encapsulated us currently. That's what your job is. Your job is not to learn so that you can perpetuate the status quo. Your job is to learn and to challenge the status quo with the knowledge that you have learned. And if that's not what if you're learning whatever subject matter you are studying so that you can get a good job and so that you can, raise your family and live, the American dream, then I really feel sorry for you, honestly. Because that American dream doesn't exist. Think about how many college students, college graduates that are out here now that can't find a job and that are wishing that they had went back to school and studied the thing that their heart so desired, and it doesn't matter how much money I make, I'm doing exactly what I love to do. And when you do what you love to do, you will never work a day in your life. So let me just lead with that. So racism is a term that as Muslims we like to dismiss under the guise that we have diversity in our religion. We have as a group people who adhere to the same religious beliefs and that we identify with a religion that has made discrimination of all forms haram, impermissible. So we'll run off the many Islamic texts from both the Quran and the practices and statements of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We'll run off the many texts that we know that emphasize the importance of unity and disparage disunity and discrimination, totally ignoring the reality that is staring us right in our face, and that racism, colorism, tribalism, all of the isms that you can think about that keep us fragmented and disunited, they exist. Don't ever say, oh, there's no racism in Islam. No, Islam has made discrimination and prejudice of all forms impermissible. But Muslims, there are some Muslims that are clearly racist. So don't use Islam to say or to dismiss the reality that is staring us right in our face, almost as if I'm crazy. It's gaslighting, modern day gaslighting. Oh, there's no racism in Islam. And it's like, but I just walked past 5 people, gave them the greeting of salam, and nobody returned the greeting of salam to me. And you want to sit here and tell me there's no racism in Islam? No, let's not do that. Because that is what is called aversive racism, which is another form of racism. And that is to act as if we're all Muslim, I don't see color, and we're all just of one faith. No. That's aversive racism. That's actually another form of racism. to deny, like, you don't see me. When you say, I don't see color, we're all Muslim, that's aversive racism, because last time I checked, I am color. I am color the last time I checked. And I have experienced discrimination and prejudice from Muslims the last time I checked because of the color of my skin. So don't say, oh, there's no racist, Muslims are not racist, as he just mentioned. No, this is what we use to assuage our own conscience, to make ourselves feel better. But the fact of the matter is that reality is not seeing things the way that we wish they were. Reality is seeing ourselves as we are. And the fact of the matter is that racism is alive and well amongst the ranks or amid the ranks of the Muslims. So one thing that we have to do before I kind of jump into that is that we have to make a distinction between institutional, systematic racism and individual racism. So let me start with the bigger form of racism, and that is institutional racism, systematic or systemic racism, which is expressed through a set of policies, institutional barriers, practices that unequally distributes resources, power, whether social, political power, or economic, and opportunities to minorities in contrast to those resources, opportunities that are given to whites. I'll say that again for the people in the back who didn't hear me. Institutionalized racism is expressed through a set of policies, practices, institutionalized barriers, right, that unequally distributes power, whether social, political, economic, opportunities, as well as resources, unequally distributes those things to minorities in contrast to the resources, opportunities, and powers that are given to whites. Okay? If you still don't believe me, follow me. All right? These policies exist within institutions that effectually disadvantage certain racial ethnic groups, such as bank lending policies. There's something called redlining, if you didn't know about that. Bank lending policies where black people are not allowed to buy homes in certain areas, are not allowed to purchase homes at prices that are given to whites so that they can build generational wealth for their children and grandchildren. Many white people right now are living in homes that were handed down to them generationally from their grandparents to their parents, and now they own it. Parents have moved into smaller, condos because the children are all grown, gave the home to this one or to that one, and they rent it out to you and me for extra nominal, prices to rent it out while they go and get another house somewhere else. In many instances, African Americans, we are not afforded that type of opportunity. All right? There was a time when land was being distributed here in America. Black people were still slaves at that time. So the land and properties that were distributed to some of these big families in America, right? We were still slaves at the time when those lands and those properties were being distributed by the government. Saudi Arabia did the same thing. They distributed land to, more elite and upperclassmen of Saudi society, while the poor Saudis, have to, rent from this person and take, loans from this bank or that bank, putting their children, their great-grandchildren, children that they will never even see in a world of debt. It goes on in all countries. It goes on. Nonetheless, these are institution policies that exist within institutions that effectually disadvantage certain racial ethnic groups, such as bank lending policies, racial profiling. If you notice you hear downtown Manhattan, you don't see a cop on every corner, but you go to Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, you'll see a cop on every single corner. Every single corner. You go to East Orange, New Jersey, you're going to see a cop on every single corner. Bloomfield, New Jersey, is now being investigated because of the amount of stops and arrests and towing of people's vehicles. And guess who the majority of those people were? African American, Hispanic. You can't even ride through Bloomfield, New Jersey without getting pulled over if you're an African American. You guys following me? So I'm not crazy. I'm not making this stuff up. This stuff really does exist. All right. So racial profiling, barriers to employment. Don't you know that they will now discriminate against you if you have a Muslim name, right? If it's any name that's out of the ordinary, it's not John, Peter, Pete, or Mark, or any name that is, acceptable according to Americans, standards. You have a name like Zubair, which is my son's name, and I know he's been discriminated against. Sad kid. I'm sorry I named him that, but nonetheless, he has to live with that. You got to challenge the status quo. I mean, we name our children these names of the Sahaba, names of some of the prophets and messengers, and although it's the same name, you go in and fill out an application and you put down Isa. And they're like, no, we're not hiring. We don't even know how to pronounce that. Issa. We don't even know what that means. It's like it's Jesus in Arabic, genius. How about I just put Jesus? So if your name is Isa, put Jesus on the paper. You probably will get hired. No, this is a fact. They discriminate based upon names. They can almost tell that, because as African Americans, we hyphenate everything. Shaquana, Sharia, Shanice. And then when they see that paper come on their desk, I'm not hiring this person. This is a fact. So we're talking about racial profiling, bank lending policies, barriers to employment, professional advancements, prison industrial complex, which houses 60 to 70% of the inmate population are African Americans. 60 to 70% of the prison population in America are African Americans, while we only make up 13% of the population. You do the numbers. Right now, a judge was just convicted in PA for a child, selling children to the system. He was just convicted, sentenced to 28 years in prison. That's it. Meanwhile, all of the tears that those mothers have shed when you sentenced their child, young black child, you sentenced him to a year, 2 years in juvenile state correctional facilities for incidents, for crimes that could have just gotten a slap on the wrist, could have gotten probation, could have gotten a second chance. But you had to keep the beds full in these private prison industrial complexes. And so you were selling children to the system. This is only one judge that got caught. You understand? A child comes in front of a judge for a simple misdemeanor, and rather than giving him probation or letting him go and, giving you a second chance, he's sent to prison 6 months, a year, 2 years. Meanwhile, his mother's shedding tears, got to go, take a bus. You know what it takes for a woman to go visit her child, whether in a juvenile correctional facility or whether in an adult correctional facility. You know what they have to go through just to go visit their children? The whole Saturday is gone just to go visit your child. The humiliation that they have to look through your pocketbook. God forbid you have woman products in your pocketbook and you have a male guard going through your pocketbook just to go visit your child. And this guy gets 28 years in prison, which he might come back on appeal maybe 5-10 years from now, get his sentence reduced, and we can never change the lives of those children that were destroyed as a result of systematic, institutionalized racism. Our country, believe it or not, was founded upon racism. Thus, most, if not all, of our institutions, whether economic, whether political, academic, educational, or even religious institutions, are embedded with policies and practices that are designed to protect and perpetuate white supremacy. Make no mistake about it. There are white churches and then there are black churches within the same religion. And believe it or not, there are Indo-Pak Arab masjids, and then there are the poor black masjids in the urban areas. that many of them will never step foot in, many of them will never get a dime sadaqah towards, but will spend thousands of dollars importing chandeliers from Turkey and expanding our masajid and going for a 3-day convention in the city of Baltimore, one of the poorest cities in America, right? And there are African-American masajid all over the city of Baltimore will go and ISNA. Yeah, I'm calling names. I don't work for any of them, so they don't control my finances. Walillahi alhamd. The best thing that you could ever do is work for yourself. You don't owe anybody anything. I don't owe you an apology. I don't work for your institution. I don't work for your organization. I don't care if you don't invite me to your conferences or be a speaker on your platforms. I don't care. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as long as I speak truth to power, Allah will make sure that I have the platform that I need. You understand? Unfortunately, many students of knowledge and imams, they get caught up in this binary, they get trapped in these organizations, these institutes where they see wrong and they can't say anything about it because they control your paycheck. You are not the power. Why should people come listen to you? You're not the power. You're being paid to talk. You are not the power. Why should we be listening to you anyway? How about we just listen to the person that cuts you the check? Because that's the real power. Because you're only puppeting what they want you to say anyway. Don't kill the messenger. I'm just stating the facts. After I'm dead and gone, you guys can sort it all out. I'm here not to placate your feelings, but to lay out the facts, and then you can figure it out later on. You can sort through all of the mess afterwards. But our country was unfortunately founded upon racism. Thus, most, if not all, of our institutions, economic, political, academic, as well as religious, are embedded with policies and practices that are designed to protect and perpetuate the white power structure. This will help many of us, especially those of us who migrated here to America, or whose parents migrated here to America. And they come with this mentality that has been shaped by the same white structures. And, that has influenced the world, that black people are somehow lazy, unproductive, and criminally dysfunctional. And as a result of that, they will never progress like other minority groups. How many of you have heard either your parents or family members say, black people will never, they've been in this country all of this time. We only been here for 20 years and we have a store and we have a house and you've been to college. All of my children have been to college. And black people have been here all of this time and they're never going to progress. So almost as if we are just inherently dysfunctional people. Not even looking at all of the institutionalized racism that keep us marginalized, that keep us exactly where we are. There's a few that slip through the cracks, but they are an exception to the rule, not the rule. You understand? And it breaks my heart when you hear Muslims who are so shallow in their thinking and their understanding that you can't see past, what's in front of you, that you would make a statement like black people have been in this country for all of this time and they still haven't progressed as a people. Many Arabs and Indian countries, South Asian countries, were colonized by the British. I'm going to give you a quick history lesson, if you didn't know. Okay? And of course, just follow along. So many of these countries were colonized by the British. Egypt, for example, was a part of the Ottoman Empire until it fell under the British rule in 1914. All right? And we all know that Britain has had an strong influence on the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Kuwait. These are the Gulf states. And we are aware. Has anyone ever lived there for a substantial amount of time? Do you not see the eurocentric worldview that Arabs have, that everything that is white is right? As a matter of fact, they advertise. When they want teachers to come over there and teach English, they advertise for white teachers only. Absolutely. I was over there as an African-American Muslim, mind you. And my white counterpart who has less credentials than I have will be given a higher position simply on the basis of the color of his skin. As a Muslim, they still treat you like crap. Many of them don't even acknowledge you as a Muslim. Don't even acknowledge you as a Muslim. So we're aware of Britain's influence on the Gulf states as well as South Asians, meaning India, what we know today as Pakistan and Afghanistan and all of those areas over there. Educational institutions back then were established that inculcated the value of British presence in those regions under the guise of modern education. And modern education had less to do with disseminating scientific rational thinking and more to do with an acquiescence to the West's superiority. To the degree that many began to adopt the Eurocentric worldview and became thoroughly convinced of the West's superiority, even at their own self-denigration and inferiority. Let me translate that for you in modern vernacular. White, everything that is white is right. Understand something. Many of your parents that grew up in these areas, go back and look at the history books and what they were taught as they were matriculating through their school systems. White supremacy was embedded in their education. So while they may not have been taught that, black people are slaves or black people in America are descendants of slaves, when you see white, everything white is right, everything other than that is wrong automatically by default. Understand how they have been programmed. You guys are getting a different education, and I'm hoping that critical thinking is a part of that. All right? But for many parents that come from those regions, unfortunately not. So much of the thoughts and ideas that many who migrate from these regions to America have about black people, in addition to the way that we are portrayed in the media, is going to be negative. All right? The media, cinema, has greatly influenced the way that people see and subsequently treat African Americans. And this translates into individual racism. So that's the institutionalized racism. I want to show how that trickles over into individual racism. Because now people who grow up in those regions, and, let me just share something with you real quick. I lived in Saudi Arabia for about 8 years of my life. Almost 7 years as a student of knowledge, and then I went back and lived in Riyadh for a year, and I taught at King Saud University. All right. During my entire time there was not a cab that I got in, except that the cab driver, Arab, who would ask me, "Where are you from? Min ayna ant? Where are you from?" And if I say, "Ana min America," I'm from America, he said, "La, illa," no, you are not. I said, "No, I'm from America." "La, illa. بل أنت من سودان أو شيء كذا أنت من أفريقيا كذا." Meaning basically, you either from Sudan or you're from somewhere in Africa. I said, "No, I'm from America." No. So let me ask you a question. Why did he refuse to believe that I was from America? Because I was not white. Why would a Saudi believe that the only people who can really be considered Americans be white? No, go deeper than that.
You were taught that.
They're not necessarily taught that. Not necessarily in those words, but the Eurocentric world view. This is a Bedu. Like, you're not going to engage in a conversation about the history of America and the natives that were here before. But they have bought into the whole idea that Christopher Columbus discovered America. You got to be kidding me. Christopher Columbus, and we still have Columbus Day. Christopher Columbus discovered America? So there was nobody on this entire continent. There was nobody here. And then Christopher Columbus just so happened to stumble over, a wave or two and land on Plymouth Rock. I mean, you got to be kidding me. The greatest lie ever told. Next to the devil doesn't exist. Greatest lie ever told. So there was nobody here, just foreign land, nobody here, not unoccupied, and we're going to come here and we're going to establish. The natives were here, and they called them Indians because they thought that they were in India. They did not discover America, and the original Americans are not white. You follow me? That wallah al-azim, for the whole entire duration of my stay in Saudi Arabia, there was not a cab that I got in except that the conversation always started with, where are you from? And I say, I'm from America. And said, well, what's your usul? What's your nationality? Where are you originally from? I say, I'm from America. I said, no, where are your parents from? Born and raised in New Jersey, both of them. No, where are your grandparents from? My grandparents is from North Carolina. Oh, no. You're from Sudan. You're from somewhere in West Africa, East Africa somewhere. He will not accept it because they have been taught with this eurocentric worldview. And many of those elders, some of them are your parents. Some of them, unfortunately, are your parents. And your job right now, because I am not going to change the way that they see me, but you can. It's your responsibility when you hear your parents use phrases like abid, or abd, or zinji, all of these derogatory phrases, which in fact means, zinji means nigger in Arabic, for those of you who've never heard the term before. Abid, slave, all right? All of these phrases, you hear your parents, you hear your uncles, your relatives use these, immediately it becomes your responsibility to challenge that. Excuse me, what did you just say? No, don't use that phrase around me. Don't use that around me. It becomes our responsibility now to change the narrative. Otherwise, you're being complicit in, an act of transgression makes you a transgressor. So, when we're talking about now how this translates into individual racism, where the actions, beliefs of superiority, and attitudes of a person are characterized by race, cultural preference. This manifests in many ways in the Islamic community individually, such as refusal to give someone the greeting of salam. This just happened to me. I was coming out of a restaurant, two Palestinian brothers who looked like they were actually homeless, right? And I'm walking with my wife. They stood right there, never gave the greeting of salam, nothing. That even on your worst day, I'm still not deserving of the greeting of salam. And you're going to say, well, there's times that I've had a thobe on, and I walk into a store, and a brother will say, "You Muslim?" It's like, well, what the hell else would I be with a thobe on? What else would I be with a thobe on? Please tell me. Oh, mashallah. What is mashallah? Like, what if I was a second, third generation Muslim? That would be an insult because it's like I didn't convert to Islam. My parents were Muslim. My grandparents were Muslim. My wife is a third generation Muslim. That would be an insult, almost as if everyone that is here kind of converted to Islam, that we don't have generational, spirituality. It's an insult. It is. To automatically assume that when you run into someone that he's not really a Muslim. Let me see. Even in Saudi Arabia, they would always ask when I go to gatherings, you married? Yeah. Mutazawij? Yes. A Muslimah. Are you married to a Muslim? It's like, who marries a non-Muslim? I mean, today people do, but when I converted to Islam 20 years ago, that was unheard of. That was unheard of. Muslim men were not marrying non-Muslim women. It was unheard of. But why would you ask me a question like that? Why wouldn't the default be he's a Muslim, he's married to a Muslimah? Because the standards, the way that you look at me is totally different than the way that you look at the rest of the Muslim world. Not refusal to give the greeting of salam. lack of acknowledgement as a Muslim, believing that they don't know much about Islam. It's like, oh, mashallah, you speak Arabic very good. It's like, what does that mean? I speak Arabic very good. You don't speak Arabic at all. Wallah al-Azim. You don't speak Arabic at all. You speak Amiya. That's not the Arabic of the Quran. You don't speak Arabic at all. You speak a dialect of Arabic that was, deduced from the Arabic, the classical Arabic language, because you don't understand the rules of Arabic in order to have a proper conversation in the Arabic language. You don't understand the rules of Arabic to have a proper conversation in Arabic. So, and I'm not saying that in a derogatory fashion, but when you say to someone, oh, mashallah, you speak Arabic very well, it's like, well, I learned Arabic as a language. Like, why wouldn't I speak it very well? I mean, no one would say, I wouldn't say to an Arab who speaks English, oh, you speak English very well. You learned the English language. You got it. Because it's not said from an encouraging standpoint. That's different when you say, mashallah, tujid al-lughat al-arabiyyah, like you're very exceptional. You speak Arabic very well as a form of praise, but it's said in a very derogatory manner. Almost like, when white people say, oh, you speak proper English. Well, you must be I remember I was in the Whole Foods and I was having a conversation with my son, and the lady at the counter, she said, you must be a teacher or something. I said, why? I said, why? Because I speak proper English? She said, no, I'm not saying that. No, you are saying that. It's okay. Say it. Say it. I'm not offended. I'm not offended because I enunciate correctly. You can hear all of my syllables and my consonants. Like, that makes me a good Negro. You're an educated Negro. It's insulting. It's no different. It's insulting. So we have to be mindful of how these little subtle forms of racism comes out in our interactions with people from other ethnicities or other cultures. And, this individual racism, it has a propensity to transcend the individual level to become a more institutionalized level in the Islamic community, such as Islamic organizations and institutions who intentionally refuse to acknowledge the scholarship and leadership of African American Muslims. All right, you have all of these huge organizations, this one, that one, these orgs, these, institutes, this institute, that institute, and they do these 3-day lectures, these conferences and conventions, and not one African American speaker. So either you're saying that African Americans are not competent enough to sit on platforms with many of your scholars, Sheikh Fulan, Shuyukh, right? That we're not competent enough to sit on those platforms, or we are not a part of the narrative. It's only one or two things, because I can't figure for the life of me why ICNA would have an entire 3-day convention in Baltimore, 23 scholars on your list, and only one African American speaker who is Imam Siraj, who's only there to fundraise. With all due respect to the Imam. He's not there to educate. He's there to raise funds, millions of dollars. And then after the 3 days is over, you pack up shop, you leave Baltimore, and you don't drop a dime and many of the masajid that are in the city of Baltimore. And you just, in the 3-day period, you've raised millions of dollars. Now let me ask you, what would the Prophet ﷺ do? Did he ever go into an environment and see poor, disenfranchised, underprivileged Muslims and just completely ignore them? Or did he give everything he had? There were poor Muslims who used to live in the masjid called Ahlul Safa. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abu Hurairah, all of them used to live in the masjid. Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, Ali's older brother, used to go to the masjid and give them everything he had in his house. He used to feed them, to the point that Abu Hurairah said, I don't know anyone who is more better of the Sahaba after the Prophet ﷺ than Ja'far. He gave precedence to Ja'far over Abu Bakr, not because he believed that he was better, but because Ja'far used to cater to the poor, unlike anybody else. The Prophet ﷺ never ate from charity. He would only eat from a gift that was given, a personal gift that was given to him. This is one of the ways that Salman al-Farisi recognized that he was actually a prophet. that he didn't eat from charity. Every time some charity was given to him, he would find the poor Muslims and he would give it to them. We go into one of the poorest cities in the United States, hold a 3-day conference, raise millions of dollars, and pack up shop and leave the city and give not a dime to one African-American Muslim masjid, minority masjid in that city. How could you live with yourself? How could you live with yourself? Leadership, acknowledgement, not refusal to acknowledge the leadership and scholarship of African American Muslims, Islamic organizations and institutions who offer little to no assistance to African American Muslim communities, whether in the form of religion, right? With all of the qadis and people that we are, importing from, Egypt and other places during Ramadan, the African American Muslim masajid, we got to pick some brother who can recite a little good and let him read from the Quran. We don't get, we're going to send a brother over to you. Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he sent Abdurrahman ibn Muljam to Egypt to go teach the people in Egypt the Quran. He said to Amr ibn al-As, who was the governor of Egypt during that time, he said that I'm sending you Abdurrahman ibn Auf, even though I need him here in Medina myself, but I'm sending him to you to teach the people in Egypt the Quran. And the same individual, Abdurrahman ibn Muljam, is the same man who decapitated Ali ibn Abi Talib, cut his head off. The same man who killed Ali ibn Abi Talib is the same man that Umar ibn al-Khattab sent to Egypt to go teach the people in Egypt. Where do we see that today? Where Muslim masjids who have a plethora of qadis, of qurra, and send them to the more disenfranchised masajid during the month of Ramadan to help you guys out. Free of charge. You ain't got to pay him nothing. Here's one of our qadis. Let him come to your masjid and lead the salah. We will take care of his accommodations. We will take care of his money. We'll compensate him. But we want you guys to be able to benefit from something that we can offer. Nothing. Meanwhile, you importing imams in from Egypt and from other places, Morocco, to come beautiful recitations. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, we're struggling. We don't have reciters in our masajid. We have the best from amongst us who can read the Quran in Arabic and stand and read from the book. Which many people don't, necessarily. I mean, when you're reading from the book, it's different when you're reading from your heart. Sounds different, comes out differently, resonates different. Even as it relates to in the form of, academic, helping out academically. All of the institutions tend to focus on their own, all of this institute and that institute. They don't ever come to African American communities. They don't ever offer their services. But we'll go and we'll rent out a university, a college, and we'll do 3-day, the fiqh of chilling and all this other stuff. And then we'll invite, and we're just going to party, order pizza, and we're going to take thousands of dollars from your parents, to babysit you for the weekend, and then we're off to the next city. This is what Islam has become in America. This is where we are. Tell me that this is what the Prophet ﷺ did with his Sahaba when he educated them. He sent them out to the people to go educate the people. You don't get to pick and choose whose community, whose city, whose place you're going to go to. We go and we choose the most ignorant of the people, and we go and we educate them. Because the most ignorant are the ones that are the most thirsty. The people who are more privileged, you don't think they don't give a damn about Islam. They don't care about learning about Islam. My parents told them they paid for the 3-day event, and I'm coming here to be babysat for the next 3 days. They're not going to change anything. They're not going to challenge anything. But you go into the poorest environments, and you will find that those people are the most thirsty for knowledge. I'm one of them. Opportunity was extended to me, and look what became of me as a result of that opportunity. Thirsty for knowledge. And my thirst for knowledge has not stopped since then. As they say, طلب العلم سهولة الدخول صعوبة الخروج. That seeking knowledge is something that is very easy to get into, very difficult to get out of. Because once you get a taste of knowledge, you can't let it go. Once you get a taste of thirst for that, you quench that thirst, you can't let it go. Up all night reading, back hurt, eyes losing vision in your eyes because of your thirst for knowledge. Financially, we take our zakat, all of these big organizations, and we'll help out the latest tragedy or catastrophe. If it's Syria, then we're going to take our zakat funds and give it to Syria. If it's Yemen, we're going to do a whole fundraiser for Yemen. Meanwhile, you got poor Muslims right here. You got to be kidding me. You will raise money for Yemen for a catastrophe that just happened. And you have poor Muslims, disenfranchised Muslims here this entire time, and you have never once did a fundraiser for them. Masajid have closed down as a result of not having adequate funding. But we'll collect millions of dollars and then boast that we went to Burma, we went to this place or that place, and mashallah, we helped them build a well. And while all of that is great, many of the scholars of Islam are opposed to what is called naql zakat, taking your zakat and taking it outside the boundaries of your own residency. Zakat should be paid in your residency first. You take care of the people that live in your vicinity first before you take your zakat and go beyond the boundaries of where you live. How do you skip right over the poor people that are right here and go all the way to, this place or that place? And I'm not saying giving zakat to Muslims that are struggling in other countries. I'm not saying anything is wrong with that. But I'm saying to intentionally overlook those poor, disenfranchised Muslims that are right here in your own vicinity and go after, the more, because it makes us look good. It's all about how we look in front of the community. MashaAllah, we just donated $2 million, to this, camp or that, camp, and it makes you look good. MashaAllah. Applaud you. MashaAllah. But how is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to see you that you intentionally overlooked people that you could have helped right there in your vicinity? And you went for, because of, And believe it or not, a lot of it, especially with the 501c3s, is a tax write-off. You give your sadaqah, you get your W-9 form, you fill it out, you get the person to fill it out, you get your money back during taxes. So it really ain't charity anyway. So let's be honest about this. Charity. Is it really charity? Are we getting that back when we collect our taxes? I've gone to institutions who have paid me and then give me a W-9 form to fill out. I fill the W-9 form out. You get that back at your taxes. You didn't pay me anything. You didn't pay anything. Because there's a lack of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if you really believe that Allah was going to pay you back, compensate you for what you gave, I'm not going to write it off on my taxes. That was for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this is the game that we play. But then we'll come in front of you and say, I donated this amount or that amount. No, you collected that back on your taxes. So really you didn't give anything. And you might not even have a reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You might be jeopardizing your akhirah. And it's time for salah. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to pray. And then we'll come back. And I have one last piece that I need to give you guys before we leave. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. If you have time, please come back and hear the last portion of this. Bi'idhnillah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So inshallah we'll be breaking for Maghrib in a couple minutes.